So YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, I feel like I'm LinkedIn. Did I say that? So anyway, today on Strategy with Sara, here's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about co-branding as a personal brand, what you need to know about it, why it's important, should you be doing it, are you doing it? So here's the thing. I'm actually going to start by kind of talking about the difference between co-branding and strategic partnerships, because there's a slight differentiation in there, even though some people might argue about whether or not they're that differentiated. So obviously, right, a strategic partnership is where you partner with someone else with a strategy in mind. So when does that happen? Lots of times it'll happen, if you think about a Venn diagram almost, if you and someone else, or if two companies, right, if you share an audience, or you share something that makes sense for you to partner together, whereby it'll bolster something that's moving towards your strategic goals. Maybe partnering together bolsters your overall visibility. Maybe it bolsters your efforts. Maybe it bolsters how you're able to serve your audience. It just, right, it makes sense for you to join forces with someone else. Now, if you enter into a strategic partnership, then generally there is some kind of co-branding that's going to come along with that anyway. So what is co-branding? Co-branding is where you tie yourself to another brand. So again, that's why I'm saying, like, you want to make sure that you're with someone who has, right, shared values at the very least. Now I'm going to start with an example, and then I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Lots of times I go back to Clubhouse, obviously, as an example, because as so many of you know, I was running at one point 80 hours a week of live programming on the platform. And one of the things that I always thought was an opportunity on the Clubhouse platform was that Clubhouse, and to my knowledge, still to this day, never had any influencer verification, AKA like a blue check. They never had any editorial standards. And so one of the things that people knew about that platform overall was that you could have a stage run by quote unquote sales experts, social media experts, business experts, and who knows in actuality what their expertise was, what their experience was, what their credentials were. And so one of the things that I was really thoughtful about was that co-creating content on that platform was and is co-branding. So I remember, for example, when I came into Breakfast with Champions, one of the first things that I did was I installed influencer verification and moderator handbooks that everyone had to sign, because I remember saying to my partner, I want everyone who's a moderator on Breakfast with Champions, who's on that stage, to feel like being a Breakfast with Champions moderator is a varsity jacket. And I want them to know that everyone who they're co-branding with, they can feel confident in that. So if they follow someone and they say this person is extraordinary, they can feel comfortable giving them their endorsement because they know that their credentials have already been verified. Or if they pull someone in to kind of share their feedback, to share their opinion, they can know that there's been a pre-vetting by essentially an editorial board, because we wanted to be building a media company, to say these are all people who are safe for you to co-brand with. If you say, yes, I'm creating content alongside this person in a shared effort, in a shared initiative, that those are people who you can be proud to share to your audience. If your audience then goes to that person to buy a service from them or to engage with them further, you can feel good that you're essentially giving them your referral, you're giving them your recommendations. So again, when we think about co-branding, another thing that you can think about is sometimes when you'll see these like limited partnerships. So like if a designer comes in and designs a line for a brand for a season, or if you see that something is offered, again, a more common term is in partnership with something else. But what makes it special, what makes it different when you're co-branding is when you thread yourself together with that brand, with that person. And so therefore, the actions that they take in their brand, right, affects yours. So sometimes it goes wrong. And an example of this would be this current Balenciaga scandal, controversy, terrible decision on behalf of that fashion house to create completely inappropriate content that really was inappropriate in the lane of affecting the safety and welfare of children, and what it was portraying. And so therefore, all of these influencers who, again, have been co-branded with that fashion house are now being called to say, well, what steps are you going to take now? Why would you affiliate with a brand who does this? So on and so forth. So co-branding has kind of a best case and a worst case scenario, that if the brand or the company that you're visibly in partnership with does something really extraordinary and your values are really aligned and they're doing something really amazing, well, it can help you reach a larger market even faster, serve them better. And you can kind of plus one, yeah, I'm affiliated with this brand that's doing this amazing thing, right? It's why we have case studies and testimonials and everything else. It's a step beyond that, because you're saying we visibly want to be working together and building something together and doing something together. And then on the other extreme, right, where it becomes really problematic with co-branding is if they do something that you do not want to be affiliated with, sign your name to, so on and so forth. So when you think about co-branding from a strategic perspective, the first thing you want to do is your research, because if you're really good at what you do, if you do something really unique, if you are visible, people are going to reach out to you. Just like think about kind of like the old school networking groups. Well, now when we're building out our businesses in lockstep together, lots of times that also includes public presence. Therefore, that includes co-branding. So the first thing you want to do when someone reaches out to you or you reach out to them is literally do your research. It begins with Google. It begins with Google. It begins with going to their website and their social profiles and seeing if they do what they say they do. It begins with seeing what other sort of content they put out, and if that's content that you are comfortable co-signing on. Depending on the size of your company and how prevalent you are, there might be additional steps that you want to go through. Again, so for example, when I was at Breakfast with Champions, we did a third-party influencer verification to really look into all of these people who we were upholding on stage and telling a multi-thousand person audience, this is someone you should be listening to. So you want to do your due diligence, you want to do your research, and you want to open the lines of communication. If you're co-branding with someone, you want to know kind of where they're going with their content and business, where you're going with your content and business, and making sure that there's no sort of misalignment or disagreement that you can see at the very beginning, that you can see from the very start. Another thing I think to think about in a future session, one of the topics that someone's asked me to cover is kind of the difference between paid press, like when someone slides into your DMs and says, give me all this money and I'll get you on a list of the top 10 coaches, versus paid, thank you so much for that, Pierre, I appreciate it, versus paid PR, which is the second one, paying a PR firm who's legitimate, that you believe in to, craft a public relations campaign for you. There are people who already have relationships with people in the press, so on and so forth. It's totally different than paying for a press placement. I'm going to go into that in a future strategy with Sara, as I've been asked to. But one of the problems whenever you just pay into a list is that if you should think forward, again, talking about co-branding, that if everyone else has just paid into that list, right? Who are you going to be on the list with, right? It's differentiated from when a journalist is doing research and ranking platforms, companies, influencers, individuals, and you earn a spot on that list. Well, then you're probably going to feel kind of pretty good when you look up and you look down and you see who's around you on the list, versus if you just pay into a list so that you can say, I paid someone and now I'm on a list of the top 10 coaches in X. Well, you know that everyone else on that list paid in too. And so are those people who are you going to be that excited with the person who's above and below you? So I wanted to do a quick session on co-branding today, on the fact that it's an extraordinary opportunity when you do it with someone who you're aligned with from a values, goals, and business perspective. It gives you the opportunity to connect your audience with someone who they can benefit from even more. It gives you the opportunity to make your efforts multiplicative. It gives you the opportunity to reach their audience. It can really be a best case scenario situation, especially if your brand identity is already defined. So it's like two really strong brands coming together. It's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich instead of just one or the other. But there are also a lot of risks if you just endorse someone, say yes to someone, just like, or I'm like, yeah, I want my content everywhere. it can end up being a challenge. Oh, okay. So Pierre says, I have a question. How do you verify that PR people really have connections with journalists? So one of the things that I think is really important is to vet any PR firm that reaches out to you. Ask them for case studies and ask them for previous people who they've worked with. And then what you want to ask those people is, thank you so much. What you want to ask those people is that a legitimate PR firm is going to have a strategic meeting with you, like any communications professionals would, where they're going to talk to you about your goals, how you want to be more visible, where you want to be more visible, where your audience is. And then they're going to come up with a custom plan for you. They're going to say, okay, your specific audience is entrepreneurs at this stage of their business. This is what they're reading. These are the sorts of publications that we're going to want to get you in with, and so on and so forth. So you are, with a legitimate firm, you are paying them to come up with a specific plan whereby they're going to pitch you to specific publications, news media outlets, podcasts, whatever it is that you decide. You're paying them for their expertise as they craft a strategy for you that they will then execute on your behalf to make you more visible. So it's a custom strategic outreach to markets that they have knowledge of. That's what a legitimate PR firm does. The people who slide into your DMs and say like, hey, this magazine that has a title that sounds a little bit like a legitimate title has 4 spots left on a list of 100 people. And if you pay me X thousands of dollars, I'll make sure you get one of them. Again, you can kind of play the tape forward and say, could they send this exact message to someone who does not have any of the qualifications that I do? Who else might be on this list? Is this something that I really want to invest in? Is this actually beneficial for my business? So I hope that answers your question. As I said, I'm actually going to do a whole session on PR in the future because it's something that I get questions about all the time. And I'm just grateful to everyone who joined today. Hey, Scott, I'm actually wrapping, but I will save this on all platforms, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on Instagram. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope that you have a really wonderful week.